All right, so what's a real price? My 10 hours of manual labor, let's say I'm getting $5 an hour, compared to your pushing a button on Wall Street that, let's say you sold something short, made $5 million in it. Um, where is the, how do you adjudicate between all the differences of kinds of labor? And so he says that the difference in the value of our labor, it adjusts. There are adjustments. So your 10 hours and the guy on Wall Street's 10 hours are not equal. And that adjustment process, um, he says, in part, it tends to happen because we compare commodities rather than labor. So if you compare the ton of apples some guy picked in a day to my cell phone, and you think about the power each of those, that ton of apples, how much power does that offer you versus what does that cell phone offer you, then he's saying that's how adjustments in labor will happen. He nevertheless wants to cling to this idea labor alone, never varying in its value, is the ultimate and real standard to calculate real price. And I'm actually working with somebody on a paper right now where we want to think of labor as calorie, because calorie would tie us into the bank, the earth, as a carbon banking system. And so the liberation of calories, like the through the burning of coal, if you tied the price of that coal to the amount of calories being liberated in the process of burning it, for instance, a tank of gas costs burns the equivalent of 31,500 calories. So if you were filling up your car and you thought to yourself, right, well, I need 31,500 calories to buy a gallon of gas, but I only need 2,000 calories to feed me for a day, and I can bike all over town, then probably I can't keep affording to fill my car with gas. I won't go any further into it than that until I've written it and gotten it peer reviewed and things like that. But it's kind of interesting because my way of calculating price then would always tie it into the natural resource banks that we have. And so the depletion of those banks then is also accounted for in the price, as is the exhaust and fumes and whatnot, because 31,500 calories clearly has more waste material than my 200 calories a day. Just a good thought experiment. All right, so in book 4, 2.9, the producer maximizes his own profits, and this helps the nation. Our little video did a nice job on that one. The producer intends only his own gain and not really concerned with public interest, nor does he know how his contribution helps the public interest. So in this way, Smith is actually very humble. And he says, quit kidding yourself that you even know what the ramifications of your work in your day-to-day life is. You don't. It is bigger than you know. And not only that, he votes on the side that if we just let people and their self-interest drive the economy, they will probably do more good than if they ever tried to do good. So the producer wants to maximize his profits, and he's led by an invisible hand to promote an end, meaning an objective, which was no part of his intention. So the fact that you have improved plumbing in the city of London because the mills were wildly successful and were producing the fabrics of Europe for a while, he's saying that was never their intention. It's an outcome, and it is best. One, don't kid yourself that what you think you're doing that is good, because sometimes it's not. And two, this kind of self-interest will more effectually than it will serve society more effectually than if you try to do good. So to think about the final cosmological ramifications, time is now commodified, value is now related to exchange. So the word value is being heard in an economic register, not a moral register. So that's an interesting kind of sliding of meaning over into the economic register. No recognition of the natural resources as limited, no mention in price of goods, no ethic for conservation, but rather you have an incentive to extract. That helps us understand our world today. Ethics has slid from an essential value that a person should cultivate their virtues to the value, as Smith says, the value of ignorance in promoting the common good. That if you were just plain old serving your own interests, maximizing your profits, it is your ignorance that will promote good better than if you were trying to do good. So this means that neither God nor human agency, but rather an invisible hand promotes the common good. So those are some of the cosmological. And so from Stanford's Encyclopedia of Philosophy, you can see the URL down there, and it's available to you. He says, a central polemic of Wealth of Nations is directed against the notion that government officials need to guide the economic decisions of ordinary people. Perhaps taking a cue from David Hume's skepticism about the capacity of philosophy to replace the judgments of common life, right? Hume wanting one to start with experience and senses and what we can know. Smith is suspicious of philosophy as conducted from a foundationalist standpoint, outside the modes of thought and practice it examines. And that's why he talks to you throughout this text as, with examples like money, he wants to bring it down to your everyday experience. Instead, he maps common life from within, correcting it where necessary with its own tools, rather than trying either to justify or to criticize it from an external standpoint. So he's not judging greed or where any of that might take things. He's simply describing what he's watching at work with the Industrial Revolution. He aims indeed to break down the distinction between theoretical and ordinary thought. This intellectual project is not unconnected with his political interest in guaranteeing to ordinary individuals the natural liberty to act in accordance with their own judgments. This author goes on to clarify, however, that unlike a contemporary libertarian take on Smith, let's remember that he wrote a whole moral philosophy of the sentiments before this, and that he promoted the outreach to the poor. He promoted public buildings being built. He promoted that for him the invisible hand was very much a civilizing force, and also the education of the populace would help serve their interests so they would not be exploited. They wouldn't get lemons. They wouldn't buy a lemon and be stuck with it, because they would be educated in how to use their labor value well and get what they needed. All right. Thanks for listening.